Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. Nothing is better than rubbing your boss's nose right in their own crappy idea, right? This is our first story. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. Let the customers do it themselves. I'm a bar attendant, and I don't know if anybody else here can share my pain. But people in the bar industry, especially where I am, take everything way too seriously. Like their effing lives literally depend on the job. I say literally because they literally won't die if they don't do it. Anyway, so I was working in this bar at a stadium and had this mega B supervisor, very anal of everything, and wanted me to abide by every single rule, official, or something she clearly made up on the spot. So the night goes off smoothly without a hitch, except for one minor thing. As I go to put a lid on the post-mix cola of a patron, the supervisor yells at me from across the bar, "What do you think you're doing?" Giving a customer a drink she paid for? Something wrong? Yes, you aren't supposed to put the lids on the cups for the customers. Let the customers do it themselves. Oh, I'm sorry, it was just intrinsic and courteous to put the lids on the cups for patrons since they do pay. Don't you let me see you again doing that. They'll be hell to pay. So for the rest of the shift, whenever a customer ordered a soda, I would very loudly tell them to do it themselves because I don't have the authority to do it and for them to do it themselves. Of course, some of the patrons would look at me twice or ask me to repeat what I already said, and once or twice I even got the supervisor to explain to the patrons how I'm not supposed to put the lids on, to her dismay and embarrassment. Side note, I would only state the fact I wasn't allowed to put lids on cups when the supervisor was around. I'm not a jerk. If she wasn't around, I'd do it myself because I effing hate the establishment I work for and would love to be fired for helping customers. And our next story. Neighbors only seem to speak one language, so I spoke it in reply. I recently bought a row house. Next to my house is a servitude. This is a path, 1.5 meters, where other neighbors have right of passage. But the path itself is my property and I have to maintain it. But recently, there's another passage, 3 meters, next to my left neighbor, so my path is never used. I know this because the shutter is electric. But I shut off my electricity when I stop working, so the shutter can't be opened. So my plan was to get rid of the fence between my yard and the servitude, both my property. I checked with the correct instance if I was allowed, and there's no reason why I won't be allowed. Just have to make sure there's still 1.5 meters passageway. When I was getting rid of my fence, my right side neighbor says hi for the first time. Not saying hi, but asking what I'm doing. After I explain I'm getting rid of the fence, he somewhat says it's only half my property, need to place another fence, and asks if I could keep the shutter closed most of the time, else his cat runs towards the street. I ignored part one and said no problem for the cat issue. I wanted to keep the shutter closed anyway. A few weeks go by and I have a container coming. I get the call at 7:30 a.m. that the truck driver is there but can't place the container. 3 cars are parked in the temporary no parking zone. One was on vacation, the other was a neighbor from across the street, and the other was obviously the right door neighbor. I had to call the police to figure out which car was from who, so I wasn't waking people up at 7:30 a.m. Then the container was getting placed in front of the house because that was how it was drawn up by the city. I just asked for a license and the city decides the exact spot. They complained and whined to the police officer that they were moving that weekend, etc. I wish now that I'd placed it in front of their house, but it would have been a bit more convenient on the other side, and the police officer replaced the signs and the container was moved. Then they came outside and asked the officer if the container could be placed at the other side of the street, which would mean that I had to walk across the street every time I needed to dump something in my container. It was 20 meters or so a lot was going in there. Officer said that there was no way in hell that would happen. Then the guy asked that I not throw anything from my first floor into the container and that I did it before from the back. Newsflash, that was the previous inhabitants, not me. Whatever, dude. Keep in mind that until the container's placed, I have to pay the driver. So them being parked illegally cost me money. All said and done. The day after, I'd done a lot already and it was time for a break. Me, my dad, and my best friend had just eaten outside and were chatting when the mother from one of the neighbors addressed us. Man, that doesn't look great. Not even a hi, just that line, talking about my grass that was growing really high because I wasn't living there yet and had been working inside all the time. My dad replies with, "It'll be easy work, just one pass and it'll be fine," and she asks what I'm planning to do about the fence, if I'm placing a new one. I inform her I'm not placing any fence. You'd think I'd killed their firstborn by the way she reacted. I couldn't do that. That path isn't mine. Yada, yada, yada. I inform her that it's my property. She says it's in their certificate, that's the word, right? That it's not. I ask her to show me, given I don't have mine at the house yet. She says they will and asks her daughter, I assume, to fetch it. She keeps yapping on and I tell her I won't discuss this and I'll continue when she shows me the documents. She keeps talking, but I just resume my talking with my dad. 5 minutes later, she's there with the certificate. I go over and ask if there's a ground plan with it. There isn't, but there's a clausule referring to the servitude. It clearly says I have to make sure the other 4 neighbors have passage, then a bunch of details about the passage. But it says it's mine. At that point, the guy's there again and seems rather aggressive. There's a fence between us, so I don't care. I state once more that it's my property and I can do this. He then raises his voice. "Don't act like you're a big shot, the man with my property," and then in almost the same breath asks if I can close the shutter from the servitude after I'm done working. I'd opened it to get through with a wheelbarrow. I found that pretty ironic given they can't open it. And if I had to abide by the certificate they just showed me, I'd have to keep it open. I angrily replied that if he'd keep on yapping, I'd keep the shutter open. He walked away. Now I'm not a petty man, so I closed the shutter. Wouldn't want an innocent cat hurt or lost. I guess this is where the war started though, and they saw me as the devil neighbor who has it in for them. So the day after I'm working again, breaking out a floor. There's no easy way of doing that. I have a jackhammer, some normal hammers and chisels, and 3 people working with me on it. Few hours after working, the doorbell rings, the police. So they called the police for noise pollution. I explained I had to break out this floor. I'll try not to be too noisy when I dump things in my container, but there's no way I can break out a floor with silence. On top of that, the servitude is between my house and theirs. Doubt a lot of noise is coming through. Police ask how much time I think I'll need, and I say I estimate a few hours, 2 or 3. They leave, likely informing the neighbors of what I said and that they advise to go somewhere for a few hours. So I'm working as hard as I can, and my jackhammer breaks. It's broken. No way I get it working. We try with just hammers and chisels, but it's way slower. Given I don't want to make noise all day long anyway, I do have other neighbors as well, I actually go to the store and buy a new jackhammer. But it's not easy finding an open store on a Sunday. So, find one. Go back to work. My front door's open because I have to reopen it every time I pass with the wheelbarrow with stone. The woman's standing there with the kid and probably yelling something, but I can't hear her. There's someone using a jackhammer between us. Eventually it dies down and she's yelling. How can I be so selfish? And I said it would only be a few hours and I had all day yesterday to do my work, as if I didn't do anything the day before. Besides, I'm allowed to work on my schedule, not theirs. My stepdad is bored with it and just starts using the jackhammer again. She can't be heard. Her husband takes her away, but within a second she's back and yells, "At least close your damn door," and slams my door shut. I wanted to go outside and floor this bee. Who the F does she think she is? But I didn't, because I, compared to others, can control and channel my anger. I spend the rest of the day that I was working figuring out how I would get what I perceive as justice. Given that we have a shared border at our property, I took photographs of everything. First, I went to a lawyer to ask about certain things. I figure it was an infraction. So they have a tarp on my side of the fence at the servitude, probably to stop wind from gusting into their backyard. That one has to go. Right next to it, there's a straw one at their veranda, probably to stop me from looking in. That one has to go. Their bin for compost is bending the wire fence onto the servitude, has to be moved. I didn't do anything yet with this information. I asked a surveyor to measure my ground, mainly the backside, because they have a shed, and after that shed, their fence suddenly jumps in. I was pretty sure it was on the servitude and therefore on my property. The same would be true about the attached gate at my side. Turns out I was right. It was on my property and in violation of the servitude clause. If that fence remained, I could not provide 1.5 meters because of my garage. I glanced over and noticed they have some nice concrete at the other side. I'd enjoy watching them break out and move the fence. But still, I looked for more. I didn't want to annoy them. I wanted to make sure they understood I don't play games. I win wars. So while I was looking at the certificate off my house, there's another clause. Because the neighbors get right of passage, they have to pay 1/5 of all costs for the servitude. I had placed an electric shutter, new tiles, the works. I contacted my lawyer with all I had, all documents necessary, and got him to send an official letter with all the issues found and that they should comply. They didn't. I sued them, and we all know the cases. They drag on. In the meantime, they were planning to move and their house was for sale. And as we know these cases, they drag on. In the meanwhile, they were planning to move and their house was for sale. But you're having a hard time selling when you're being sued over an issue with the property. I won the case, but they didn't do anything. I sued them again for not complying, and they finally did. They had to pay me quite a lot in legal costs for the work done on my servitude, and some for the work to do on their end. I assume they had to get a bridge credit to pay for the new house while the old one's on sale. They eventually did manage to sell and move. They spoke to me with arrogance and aggression. I showed them not to taunt me when I try to be friendly the first 2 times. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.